Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast. We cover everything Major League, from spring training to the World Series. We've got your favorite club covered, from New York to Boston to LA. This is the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Ridenour, and I've got a really good show in store for everyone at home. Thanks so much for joining me today. Hope everyone has been doing well. I've actually officially wrapped up school. The semester is finally over, and I am very excited to be done with school and get ready for the holidays ahead. We've got a lot of news to cover because there's been a little bit of, some recent developments in the baseball world. I'll also touch on some other topics that will include some major free agent targets and such, all the, everything else in between, really. But sticking with the opening segment, I'll first hop right into some news for the week and any and all updates on the latest developments in the baseball world recently. Later on, I'll get into discussing some of the biggest sluggers from each state and what their all-time home run numbers are in their careers based on the state that they're from. I'll then get into discussing which teams are now the likely suitors for JT Realmuto after James McCann was signed by the New York Mets the other day, and I'll share which teams I think he could eventually go to if things played out in his favor. And be sure to stick around for the final few minutes of the show today, as I will get into a list of players who you would want to build a team around right now. I'll discuss how those players have been in their careers and what their potential could mean for teams in the future. So we've got a lot to cover today. It's going to be a really fun show. But I want to jump first into probably, I don't want to say the biggest, but it's probably a top 3 story in baseball over the last week, and that is the recent news that the Cleveland Indians, they will be changing their name, and they have officially announced that they're going to be moving on from the nickname after the 2021 season. But they are going to still keep the name around for the 2021 season, again, due to a lot of copyright and trademark issues, trying to work out all those legality formalities, if you will, and having to deal with those kind of ins and outs of the business world and that aspect of baseball. But for the most part, I think this probably was, I think a lot of people could have seen this coming. We've already seen one team change their name because of the derogatory history that it carried with them in the Washington football team now changing their name, and now we're seeing the Indians, and they're going to start changing their name. They actually already had gotten rid of their old logo, the Chief Wahoo, in 2018, although this is actually very interesting. They still sell merchandise with that logo on T-shirts, hats, whatever it might be. So it kind of, when I read this story, right, when it came out and everything, there was a couple things that I just felt were very contradictory, and that was one of them, is you're going to go ahead and change the name, yet you're still selling merchandise with the old logo on it. So I really don't understand where the consistency is in all of this, because if you're going to change the name, you might as well not sell. That's what the Washington football team does. Anything with their old name, the Redskins, they have now pretty much wiped away any sort of merchandise or any sort of form of the old logo. All of those remnants have been completely obliterated and wiped out from any possibility of somebody buying. And as a result, they've completely rebranded themselves. And the Indians, I think, are going to have to do that same thing. They're going to have to completely get rid of that Chief Wahoo logo, and they're going to have to, again, they're coming up with an entirely new name. The owner of the Indians, Paul Dolan, said their name will have no reference to Native Americans at all. So they're going completely away from that theme, and I think, again, that's a wise decision on their part. It's starting to really, come to the surface that these names are outdated, that you can't continue to have these problems with, a name that is going to, again, divide the community. It's going to cause division in the city. And Paul Dolan was very vocal about that, and he felt very strong that because of this logo and because of this name of the team, it was starting to cause a rift in the community and just a rift amongst people in Cleveland. And being a smart man like Paul Dolan is, he said, you know what? I'm going to get with the times. I'm going to become much more aware of what's going on in our world, and I'm going to be able to unify our community and bring some, extra life into the baseball scene in Cleveland. And I think, again, it's going to sure, it's going to take some time for people to get used to it. I'm sure there are a lot of people out there that are very against it and that are really wanting the name to just stick around. I completely understand that. I mean, it's a 105-year-old name. I'm sure there's lots of people that grew up just calling them the Indians, and, they might not have ever thought of what it actually meant. It was just the name of the team at the time. So I think that it's going to take a lot of time for people to get used to it. It's going to get a lot of time until people can work it out of their system calling them the Indians. And who knows what their new name is going to be. I mean, it's going to be very interesting to see what kind of name they're going to come up with and if there's going to be any sort of reference to maybe, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I mean, that's really, I think, one of the big things in Cleveland for the most part is the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. So maybe the Cleveland Rockers or, something along those lines. Maybe the Cleveland. Now, they do have the river right there. They do have, I believe it's either Lake Erie or Lake, one of the big Great Lakes is right by Cleveland. So, I mean, you could call them, the Cleveland Lakemen or the Cleveland Lakesters or something like that. I mean, that would obviously probably hint towards the Lakers of L.A. for the basketball team. But, again, I think they can get really creative with this. I mean, look at Baltimore. They went after the state bird, the Orioles. I mean, that's very creative, right? So I think it's just going to take some time for them to figure out the name. They're going to keep rolling with it in 2021, but then after that, they're going to be moving on from it. So I think it's a lot of really good stuff coming down the road for the Cleveland Indians as they're going to change their name, completely rebrand, and they're going to have a whole new identity. And I think it's going to, Paul Dolan said it really well. We've had devoted fans for 105 years that have, really stuck by this name, and we hope that the new name we pick, it doesn't, survive 105 years, but actually longer. So he wants a name that's going to stay around and that will always be a kind of a symbol of, hey, this is a new chapter in Cleveland baseball in the area. So that's just one story out of the many that have been going on in baseball. There's also been a lot of talk about the highly popular pitcher in this free agency market, getting into some free agent stuff because, again, the market is still, pretty, I would say, busy for the most part with all the talent that's still on the board that have yet to been signed. And Trevor Bauer, as of now, again, one of the probably the most sought-after free agents overall and the number one sought-after pitcher free agent, he's now started to get into the radar of the San Francisco Giants, and they've become a new team that has really, taken some interest in the NL Cy Young winner from this past year. And honestly, I think this would be a ginormous get for the San Francisco Giants because this team clearly struggled from the mound. I mean, they were 18th in team ERA in 2020. They were 24th overall in team strikeouts. And adding a guy like Bauer, not only did he lead the NL, and if I'm not mistaken, he was second in the entire MLB behind Shane Bieber in ERA for the entire season, and he was one of three pitchers to strike out at least 100 batters. So right there, you would definitely be bringing yourself out of, that 18 to 25 range in the league, kind of that, very bottom percentile, and you're going to start building yourself back into, a higher percentile, especially in the pitching department. Now, I will say, the Giants did, they did go after and re-sign Kevin Gausman, who had a very good 2020 year. He had 79 Ks, 3-3 record, 3.62 ERA, and he accepted the qualifying offer of $18.9 million. So right there, they do have a little bit of, change going towards Gausman. So that might hinder how much money they can give Bauer overall. But in the entire grand scheme of things, they need pitching. They need pitching more than anything. Johnny Cueto, who's, again, is supposed to be, or supposedly, their ace pitcher, is now getting really old. I mean, he is 35. He had a 5.33 ERA last year. Jeff Samardzij's contract is actually up after next year. And there's other guys that are going to become free agents in 2021, like Gausman, who's, again, on this one-year deal, Brandon Belt, Brandon Crawford. That's all in all, each player is earning $15 to $18 million in contracts in 2021. So you take them off of the payroll, mixed in with Jeff Samardzija, and who knows what you do with Johnny Cueto, all of a sudden you've got plenty of room to give Trevor Bauer a nice sizable contract. And again, he's a West Coast person. He's originally from L.A., so being in the West Coast, being in his home state, I think would definitely be very appealing for him. I will say the Giants lost Drew Smyly also, and he had a very good year on the mound, so I think that's, another reason why they need to go after some starting pitching. And the bullpen really struggled a lot this year as well. So I think that's going to be something that they really need to address because the hitting is there. I mean, the hitting has come a long way. I mean, they were 5th in team average this past year. They were 6th in team RBIs. Adding some pitching around that hitting, it's going to be a totally different conversation that we're having about the San Francisco Giants. So I'm really excited to see what their, off-season moves entail, what's going to happen moving into Christmas and the New Year and everything along the lines. And if they can really make a move after Trevor Bauer, I think they're going to put themselves into a nice little conversation for a playoff run next year. But I don't want to jump the gun on that one because, again, there's a lot of time and there's a lot of things that can happen between now and then. So who knows what's going to happen and what player gets traded, gets picked up, gets released, gets injured, whatever. And so don't want to speak too fast, but I definitely think that if they added Bauer, they would put themselves in a really, really good spot for next year. Once again, some more free agent news. I know I'm kind of jumping around. I wanted to get in the most pressing news with the Indians changing their name, but again, swinging the conversation back towards free agency. And once again, another team, and really, I shouldn't say another team because this is a team that I have been very high on this entire offseason because I have felt very strong about the moves they've made. And actually, I think they've all been very thought out and meticulous moves. The Kansas City Royals, I mean, they've made, again, some of the best moves this offseason. They've now gone out and made another move, re-signed Greg Holland, three-time All-Star and former Comeback Player of the Year, to a one-year, $2.75 million deal. The Royals just keep making moves that I love, and I don't know what it is. They're quiet moves. They're nothing outstanding. They're nothing astronomical, but they are steady moves. They are moves that are needed, and they are doing everything that they have to put themselves into a little bit of a better spot for next year. And Greg Holland's coming off a great year. I mean, he had a sensational season, 3-0 record, a 1.91 ERA, 31 Ks, 7 walks, in 28 and a third innings pitched in relief. He had one of the lowest ERAs ever in his career at a 1.91 clip. So pretty much just about a career year that Greg Holland is coming off of. And actually, another fun fact about him, in 28 appearances this season, he had 23 of those 28 appearances scoreless. And it was tied for the third most in the league this year. So he's pretty much the most efficient starting or relief pitcher that you can think of. Going in, and there's only 5 instances where he gave up any sort of offense. That's pretty sensational, if you ask me. So the Royals have really bolstered up that pitching core. They obviously went out and got Mike Minor. They've got now Greg Holland back on board. And not to mention, they went out and got Carlos Santana. They went out and got Michael A. Taylor. So now they've added hitting with Santana, they've added defense with Michael A. Taylor, and they've added pitching with Holland and Minor. So now they've really, I don't want to say that they are done, because I think this Royals team is going to continue to make some moves, because in all honesty, it's not like they're paying anybody any astronomical amount of money, right? They're not a huge payroll team. So as a result, you're not sitting there thinking, oh man, they've signed 4 guys already this year. Yeah, there have been one contract that was $2 million, one contract that was $2.75 million. I'm pretty sure Michael A. Taylor was signed for not even $2 million. The only one that got a sizable contract was Carlos Santana, and rightfully so. The guy has probably been, next to Greg Holland, the most successful player in their respective career that have signed with the Royals. So it makes there's no shock to me that Santana got that sizable contract. But again, only earning, I think it was a $17 or $18 million deal for 2 years. He's not even making $10 million a year. So they can still go out and spend and go out and get somebody, that could be a nice seasoned veteran for a season, or somebody to have, fill, if somebody is injured on their team, fill the void for a season or for the year, whatever it might be. I think that they're not done making moves, and I think they're going to continue to make some really needed adjustments on their team, and I'm really excited to see what their next move might be and kind of what the next direction is for the Royals, because in all honesty, I mean, if they make the right move and if they, they could make a big splash. They could be kind of slowly but surely making their way to getting a really big free agent and really trying to make a huge splash. I mean, another name that kind of pops to my mind, and again, this is probably a very, very far reach, but Justin Turner. Justin Turner is a free agent, okay? He's in his mid to late 30s. He's definitely getting up there in age. So the Dodgers might want to just say, no thanks. On you go to free agency. And okay, so the Royals could maybe take advantage of that if that were to happen. And if it were, they could say, hey, we're going to give you a 2-year deal, maybe a year deal for $5-6 million a year, something like that. You're getting a little bit older. You're a veteran. Your role is going to be, showing the guys that are younger the ropes. And this Royals team's also got a very good farm system. So I think that as time goes on, they're going to continue to build this team up. They're going to continue to build kind of this core of not only great farm system players, but also a couple additions that they've made. And I think, not necessarily next year or the year after. But I definitely think that in a couple years, they're going to be a pretty solid team. And Dayton Moore, who's their GM, he's done a sensational job with the team. And he's been part of the team since 2006. He was responsible for them winning, a World Series in 2015. So I think, in all honesty, he's doing the right thing. I mean, he's making the right moves, and it's just a matter of everything falling into place. So I'm very excited to see what is next for the Kansas City Royals. But there's also some other rumors in the free agency world, and most recently another name being floated around, Liam Hendriks, one of the best relievers over the last few years in the league from the Athletics, has now been linked to the White Sox in recent days. Now, this would be another huge move by the White Sox. The White Sox have already done a couple really solid moves, I think. I mean, obviously going out and getting Lance Lynn, that was a really big get. And they already had a lot of pieces to begin with. But if they continue to boost that and strengthen that pitching core and that pitching staff, I think that's going to set them apart from other teams, because it was clearly not the hitting that affected them in the long run. It was the pitching. It was the lack of experienced pitching in critical moments of the season. And as a result, that's what really set them back a little bit and was kind of the result in them losing in the wild card series of the playoffs this past year. The hitting was there the whole year. You have Eloy Jimenez, you obviously have Jose Abreu, the reigning AL MVP, you have Nick Madrigal, you've got Tim Anderson, the list goes on and on and on, and you've got some really good players that you can build with for the next couple years. And if they go out and they get somebody like Hendricks, they also went out and got Adam Eaton, so they've addressed their issues in left field. I think they're making moves because they know that this is their time to win. This is their small window. And if they don't take advantage of this, this might be a storm that passes over them that they can't take advantage of. And I think that would be a kind of a disappointment, in all honesty, especially with the talent that they have right now. And the pitching would definitely be strengthened, adding Liam Hendriks. I mean, Hendriks was incredible in 2020, 1.78 ERA, a 3-1 record in relief, 37 Ks, 3 walks, a 235 ERA plus. That's pretty outstanding, if you ask me. He actually had back-to-back seasons in 2020 and 2019 where he had over a 230 ERA plus. So the last 2 years, he's been pretty much untouchable. And not to mention, the White Sox, one of their main relief guys, their closer, Alex Colomb, he's a free agent. And who knows what's going to happen with him and if he's going to stick around, if not. But if he leaves and he goes and kind of explores his options in free agency, then Liam Hendriks is going to slide his way right onto that closer position. And there is no question about that. Because, again, he's a little bit older. He's getting into his 30s for the most part. So you could definitely get him for somewhat of a bargain. You wouldn't have to pay an arm and a leg for the guy. And I think that if you're looking at this short term and this is a very small window that you're trying to take advantage of, sign him for 2-3 years and then get rid of him. And that's it. You would be getting him at the best that he's been at. And then once, if and when they do win the World Series and, things kind of unravel from there, then they can get rid of him and say, you know what? We did what we had to do, and we appreciate your time here, and you were a big part of it. So I think that Hendriks would be a massive get for them. But if Colomb sticks around, Hendriks will probably, he would maybe still be an option for them, not necessarily in a closer position, but more of a relief position. I just think that Colomb was going to try and be their first priority, but if not, it's definitely going to be Hendriks, because Hendriks, I think, has a lot to get to bring to the table, especially to this White Sox team that I think is going to be very, very good. Not to mention, the White Sox bullpen needs to figure it out. They were tied for third this year with the most blown saves in MLB, and they were tied for the fourth lowest save percentage also. So getting Hendriks would definitely figure that out, and if they were able to somehow, some way, finagle their way into getting and keeping Colomb and then going out and getting Hendriks, that bullpen and those numbers would totally flip from this past year to next year. I mean, it would be night and day pretty much in terms of their performance coming out of the pen. So hopefully they can go out and get somebody like Hendriks, because if not, again, they're going to probably be back to square one. Colomb taking, his options into free agency, and then no Liam Hendriks. They're going to have to go back to the drawing board and see who they can get in that situation. But nonetheless, I'm very excited to see what the White Sox do, because, between them, the Royals, I think the AL Central is going to be a very intriguing division to watch this upcoming year. So that'll do it for us in this first segment, but stay right there, folks, because after the commercial, I'll highlight a few of the best and biggest sluggers from each state and discuss the home run totals they have in their career based on which state they are from. Folks, stay right there. We'll be right back here on the GSMC Baseball Podcast.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA, to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Welcome back to the GSMC Baseball Podcast. Jack Ridenauer with you all, and in our first segment, I discussed some of the latest news in the league recently and mentioned some of the latest rumors going around the MLB free agency. Be sure to stick around for the final few minutes of the show today, as I'll discuss which players I would most likely want to build a team around for the future. I'll share their career so far and also where I see their career trending towards in the near future. There's been, again, I want to jump into this new segment now because I want to discuss some of the best and biggest home run hitters from each state. Now, I'm not obviously going to go through each and every single state, but I'm going to pick out a couple states with a couple home run leaders that I was either very shocked by or that they were actually ahead of some other very well-known and potentially Hall of Fame caliber players that probably would shock you in a lot of ways. So there's obviously been a lot of great home run hitters over the years from various states, but there are some states that I didn't know these well-known hitters were from actually originally. So the first one I want to discuss is Harmon Killebrew, so a very, very talented hitter for the Minnesota Twins. I believe he played for the Washington Senators as well. He was, again, played in the 50s and 60s, very long time ago. He's actually originally from Idaho. And he is, again, without question, the all-time leader in home runs from people from Idaho that played in the MLB. Because, again, there's not many people that have probably come out of Idaho that have played in the MLB. So he had a career 573 home runs for his entire career. That's a pretty, staggering thing to have, especially for somebody that is originally from, Idaho. Not many people are there's not a huge sample size, but still, that is a hard number that a lot of people are going to have a tough time trying to catch up with. Now, the person that is in second is Vance Law, and he's in a very close with 71 total home runs. So again, a little bit of sarcasm there. Obviously, he's way off from trying to get Harmon Killebrew, who is a Hall of Fame baseball player. He's a multiple-time All-Star, 11-time All-Star, 1969 MVP. He belted 40-plus home runs in 8 different seasons. And, Killebrew literally killed balls. He literally did that. He led the majors in home runs 4 separate times, and he led the AL in the same categories 2 separate times. So the guy was just a natural-born hitter. And I think, coming from Idaho, probably not a whole lot of scouts going up there to catch some baseball. So I think that it's just an impressive thing that he was able to still find his way to the major leagues, and not only find his way to the major leagues, but have an incredible season nonetheless. If you look at his numbers are absolutely staggering. From 1961 all the way to 1964, he never hit fewer than 45 home runs. In 1961, he hit 46, and then 48, 45, and 49. And again, going back to, the 50s and the 60s, you're probably not seeing those numbers all the time. That's probably not something that you see like it is in today's age, where guys are belting 30 and 40 home runs all the time. Probably a very different time period back then. And I think that also speaks volume to how good of a hitter Harmon Killebrew was. He never batted above 300 in his career, which was very interesting to see. His career high was 290, and he actually... let me retract that original statement. He did hit above 300 one time, and it was in his rookie year, but he played 9 games. So out of all the years that he played, more than 9 games, he never batted above 300. And actually, what's also very coincidental is his career high, other than the 308 year that he had his rookie season, the next closest, the 290 season that he had, he only played 9 games as well. So the 2 years he played only 9 seasons were his highest batting averages. But every other year, his average was not, not incredible. It wasn't anything spectacular. In 1959, he batted .242, but he had 42 home runs and 105 RBIs. And then you go down a little bit further, and a couple years later, in 1968, he batted .210. but then he wound up having 17 home runs and 40 RBIs. A little bit off of those other numbers that he was having in previous seasons, but he was still an all-star that year. He still played very, very well. And then actually, again, the year after, in 1969, that was his career year. He had the best year he had, leading the majors in home runs and RBIs, led the entire AL in walks, and he led the entire AL in OBP, and he had a 276 average and won the MVP. So not too bad of a year for a guy from Idaho, and is the all-time home run leader out of any player to come out of Idaho. But Vance Law, he had a pretty decent career himself. He played 11 years for a couple different teams, spent some time with the White Sox. He was an all-star in 1988, actually, batted a career-high 293. But this is a big reason why he only had 71 career home runs. He never batted more than 17 homers in an entire season. So very different from Harmon Killebrew. And I think that, Vance Law probably realized, if he even knew that Harmon Killebrew was from Idaho, I think Vance Law knew that he had his work cut out for him trying to catch up to Killebrew's numbers, because there was just no way that was going to happen. So that's the big-time home run hitters from Idaho. Now, getting into another state, Mississippi, and this is very interesting. Ellis Burks is actually the all-time home run leader for people from Mississippi that have played in the MLB. And a very close second is Dave Parker. And this is shocking because Dave Parker, if you look at his career next to Ellis Burks, it's very different. Ellis Burks, he was a very good player in his own right. Dave Parker, though, on the other hand, a 7-time All-Star, a former MVP. Parker is only a couple home runs behind him. He batted 339 homers, whereas Burks had 352. So only a 13 home run difference, not that big of a difference. But in terms of the accolades for the career, Dave Parker really, he jumped up, leaps and bounds over Burks in that department. Burks, though, he had a very decorated career. Played 18 years for various teams like the Red Sox, White Sox, Rockies, Giants, and Indians. He had a few monster seasons, a few monster home run seasons. Batted 40 home runs in 1996, and then the last 6 years of his career, he batted at least 20 or more homers in 4 of those 6 seasons. So a pretty solid percentage of those, 6 seasons that he had where he was absolutely on a tear home run-wise. And he was a pretty solid hitter across the board. He had a career average of 291, only had 3 seasons where his OPS plus wasn't above 100. So he put up some very, very solid numbers. Only a 2-time All-Star, though. He didn't have necessarily the accolades that Dave Parker had. You look at Dave Parker, and Dave Parker's, again, a 7-time All-Star, an MVP, a World Series champion. And Parker was really one of the better players in the late 70s to late 80s. And he's, I think, one of the better home run hitters overall in terms of consistency. And I think that was the difference between Burks and Parker. Burks was more so kind of, I don't want to say, it wasn't necessarily not consistent, but it was, he had a couple years where he had some monster home run seasons. 1996 he hit 40, the next year he hits 32. You scroll down a little bit, and then 1999 he hits 31 home runs, and then 24 after that, 28, 32. And again, that's getting into the latter part of his career, and he was still producing at a high level. Those 4 seasons I just rattled off, 3 of those 4 years he had over 90 RBIs as well. So not too bad of numbers for Burks in the long run. Was only an All-Star in 96, and in 1990, he was a Silver Slugger one year. He was a Gold Glove winner also, and he finished, top 15 a couple times in the MVP voting, nothing spectacular. But then you go over to look at Dave Parker, and Dave Parker's a totally different story. Again, one of the better players in the 70s and 80s, had a lot of great runs with the Pittsburgh Pirates, was a 2-time World Series champion, 3-time Gold Glove winner, and actually, what's very interesting is that Parker had 9 years where he hit 20-plus homers out of the 19 years that he was in the MLB. So in terms of consistency, again, much better than Burks. And their numbers were virtually the same in terms of batting average. Dave Parker's career batting average is 290. Ellis is 291, so just about the same. And this is what's very interesting, is that Parker's MVP season that he led the MLB in, he actually pretty much led them in just about every single category. Led the MLB in average that year, led the NL in slugging, and then led the MLB in OPS, and he led the MLB in OPS plus that season as well. But despite those numbers, Ellis still hit more homers than he did by about 13. So although, Parker's got the All-Star nods, the MVP, the World Series championship that Burks doesn't have, Burks still holds the record for most home runs by people from Mississippi to play in the MLB. So hats off to Ellis Burks being able to still, outduel one of the best players from the 80s by far. So getting into another state that I'm really kind of, I don't want to say shocked by, but, very intrigued by, is Missouri. Ryan Howard is actually the leader for most career home runs from players in the MLB, with 382 from, again, people from Missouri. So, and again, if you look at Ryan Howard, and you know, growing up, Ryan Howard was always a really big name, a really big player. I always remember watching him, and you know, you don't really, I think, especially when I was a kid at that time, I did not really register that he was having that good of a year. And now that I look back at it, it's like, wow, you know, you really witnessed some incredible seasons. I mean, his first year, his rookie year, you know, he only played 19 games. Whatever. You're going to scratch that season. The next season, though, he improves his overall numbers from, you know, hitting 2 home runs his rookie year to then in 2005 hitting 22 home runs. And then the RBI numbers went from 5 to 63. And then in 2006, that's when that jump just absolutely skyrocketed for him, going from 22 homers in 2005 to then 58 homers in 2006. And then the RBIs also jumped from 63 to 149. That's absurd. I mean, that's an absurd jump. And not to mention, you're going in 3 years from 2 home runs to 58 home runs. That is a wild increase of home runs. I mean, there is no question about it. And Howard is actually the fastest player to ever reach 250 career homers, as he did it in only 855 games. But there's a reason for it. I mean, all the way up until, you know, 2009. So you look at from 2006 to 2009, he never hit less than 45 homers and 135 RBIs. That's not too shabby of numbers to have for a guy that really kind of just exploded onto the scene. I mean, he really just came out of nowhere. He was a Rookie of the Year in 2005, which was his technical rookie year. And then the next year in 2006, an All-Star, an MVP, a Silver Slugger, finishes top 5 in the MVP the next 2 years, and then finished actually 3rd in the MVP voting in 2009, was an All-Star in 2009, an All-Star in 2010. And again, I think injuries are really what caught up to him. You know, ruptured his Achilles in 2011, I believe it was, and he just really was not the same after that. You know, his numbers started to kind of dip down a little bit, and it just wasn't the same Ryan Howard that was putting up 58, 47, 48 home runs and 148, 149 RBIs. And what's very interesting, though, is that who he's ahead of is Yogi Berra. Yogi Berra is arguably one of the best catchers ever, and he was part of some very infamous Yankees teams that won many World Series. He was an 18-time All-Star, a 3-time MVP, Hall of Famer. I mean, Berra was, you know, he was pretty known for home run hitting, especially at the catcher position, and he connected on 20 or more homers for 10 straight years. And again, if you look at that as from a catcher standpoint, that's something that does not happen very often, right? The catchers are not, and I've said this many times, talking about JT Realmuto and everything else like that. Having a catcher that's a home run hitter is a secret weapon in the long run, and Yogi Berra was exactly that. So it's very interesting to see that Yogi Berra is trailing Ryan Howard. But again, Ryan Howard had a very quick start. I mean, 58 home runs, 47, 48, and 45, all within your first 5-6 years of playing. That's a pretty staggering amount, if you ask me. So that's the home run leader from Missouri. So now I'm going to get into the next couple states. Only have a few more. And the next one I want to discuss is Nevada, as Bryce Harper leads all players from Nevada with 232 home runs. Very close to him is Chris Bryant. And this is very interesting because both players are well into their careers, but neither one of them, I think, are anywhere near retirement. I mean, obviously, Bryce Harper is 1 or 2 years in on his 10 or 11-year deal with the Phillies. Chris Bryant is a couple years actually younger than Bryce Harper. So they're both, I mean, it's going to be a race, I think, towards the end of their career. Who is going to be the home run champion of Nevada? And Chris Bryant has 142 career home runs as of right now to Bryce Harper's 232. So I think this little race that they'll have back and forth will be very interesting. And Harper, I mean, he's been pretty incredible in his career. I know a lot of people are very critical of him because I think of his personality, maybe, how he comes off, his ego, maybe, you know, whatever it might be. But 7 of his 9 years actually have been 20-plus home run seasons. So in almost all of the time that he's been in the MLB, he's belted at least 20 or more home runs. That's a pretty incredible, you know, stat to have, and it's an incredible, you know, statistic to really, you know, be able to share. And then, not to mention, he had an MVP season in 2015. He led the MLB in OBP that year, slugging and OPS. So he has very well put himself into the category of one of the better hitters and one of the better players, I would say, in all of baseball. And honestly, Bryant has been just as good. I mean, he was an MVP also, a 3-time All-Star, solid home run-wise numbers, with 2 years actually in his career of 30 or more homers, and then 4 years with 25 or more home runs. So he's also been a big home run guy. And again, they're both pretty, I don't want to say relatively young in their career, but they both came into baseball very young. I mean, Bryce Harper was 18 years old when he came into the league. Chris Bryant was not that much older than, how old Bryce Harper was when he first came into the league. So I think that overall, this could be a down-to-the-wire kind of neck-and-neck battle and race between the two to see who is going to be, again, the home run champion of Nevada. So I think it's going to be a fun thing to watch throughout the years and throughout their careers and see who's going to come out on top. But both of them, I think, are very, very capable of taking that crown of the home run champion of Nevada. So getting to the next state, Nebraska, and this is kind of a lower number home run state because I think that, for the guy that is leading it has only 190 career home runs, and that's Alex Gordon. And very close to him is, well, not too close, but not too distant, with 118, is Hall of Famer Wade Boggs. And so that is what really shocked me, is that Alex Gordon, who, again, Alex Gordon had a very good career. Decided to retire after this year, played many, many years with the Royals, part of their World Series team, won 8 Gold Gloves, 3-time All-Star, a very decorated career. But then you look at Wade Boggs, and Wade Boggs' years were just absolutely staggering. I mean, very, very staggering. He had, a couple years where he was, seriously up there in terms of batting average, but neither one of them were big-time home run guys. I mean, Wade Boggs, he only had a career high, and this was only one time, of 24 home runs in a season. Other than that, though, he only had 2 years in his entire career where he had double-digit home runs. You look at his home run numbers for his career, and he's playing pretty much the entire season, 7 home runs here, 8 home runs there, 6 home runs here, only 2 years. In 1987, he had 24, and then 1994, he had 11. Those are the 2 seasons that he had double-digit home runs. The other highest total he had was 8, and he did that 3 different times. So not a big home run guy, and especially from somebody who's, again, a Hall of Famer, 12-time All-Star, World Series champion in 1996. So he has had a very decorated career, somewhat similar to Gordon, but just, a couple more All-Star nods, not nearly as many Gold Gloves, actually, and, more Silver Sluggers because, you look at his batting average numbers, and they were staggering. He had a career batting average of .328, and he had some insane years. His rookie year batted .349. And the next year he follows up with .361. And then after that, from 1984 to 1988, it goes .325, then .368, .357, .363, and .366. So he batted .360 or higher for 3 of those 4 years from 1985 to 1988. That is a really hard thing to do in baseball. Not to mention, he's playing 160 games, anywhere really ranging in those years from 147 to 161 games. So that is very challenging to do. Alex Gordon, though, on the other hand, again, just not a big home run guy. I think that he was more so of a great fielder, and he did get recognized for his overall playing, though. A 3-time All-Star, that's not an easy thing to do. And he was, not to mention, a 2-time Platinum Gold Glove winner, so somebody that is a very, very good hitter, very good fielder, I should say. Now, you look at his home run numbers, very different, right? Much higher, I would say, than Wade Boggs, obviously. But again, nothing astronomical. He had 1 year that was his career high with 23 in 2011. Then he followed up with 14 home runs in 2012. And then his 3 All-Star years back to back to back, he batted 20 home runs, 19 home runs, and 13 home runs. So, nothing astronomical, but again, nothing bad, nothing off, nothing that isn't very deserving or noteworthy. But again, a lower home run total from the state of Nebraska. So very interesting just to see kind of where these big-time home run hitters are coming from as opposed to others. But then you do have some outliers, like Harmon Killebrew from Idaho. That is definitely an outlier. But the last state I want to get into is New York, and the leader of that is Alex Rodriguez. Career 696 home runs. Now, I think a lot of people might think, didn't Alex Rodriguez get drafted out of high school from Miami? Yes, he did go to high school in Miami, but then he was originally from New York. That's where he's actually from. And honestly, there's been a long list of great players to come out of the state of New York. You've got Edgar Martinez, had a lot of great years with the Mariners, Carl Yastrzemski, Craig Biggio, all natives of New York. But again, none of them were the home run hitters like Alex Rodriguez. Rodriguez, he put up some insane seasons. And again, another player like Ryan Howard, where when I was growing up, I didn't really register how good and what I was really watching. And then you go back and you look at it later on in your life and you're like, wow, they were really good. And it went way over my head because I wasn't in-depth covering sports like I am now. So it's just very interesting to kind of realize what, you witnessed so many years ago, and then just to look back at it and say, wow, that was a pretty incredible time. I do remember how good he was, just didn't realize that he did that kind of damage. 13 straight years of at least 30 or more home runs. That's unheard of. You don't find that really anywhere. That is a really hard thing to accomplish. And the RBI numbers were also through the roof as well. 14 out of his 22 years being in the MLB, he had over 100 RBI seasons. So 14 of 22 years, over half of the time in his career, he hit over 100 RBIs or more in a season. That is very staggering. Now, who's second behind Alex Rodriguez? Another Yankee great in Lou Gehrig. He was also a great home run hitter. He had numerous 30 to 40 home run seasons. He had 5 straight years where he knocked in at least 140 RBIs or more, and had 11 straight years of 120 RBIs or more. So another guy that, in all honesty, if we were kind of looking at RBIs for a career, Lou Gehrig might take the cake on that one over Alex Rodriguez, which would be very interesting. Because Gehrig actually had a year where he had 185 RBIs, and he had 2 seasons that he had 173 RBIs. That is literally unheard of these days. You do not see guys having that many RBIs ever. And if you do, they are getting a steroid test, a drug test, the very next day, if not right before their press conference after whatever game they're playing, because those are just unheard of numbers these days. But again, Rodriguez, he had a sensational career, nearly 700 career home runs. Not that bad. And again, I think it's unfortunate that it was a little overshadowed by steroids towards the end, and I think when that all kind of came out, there was a big-time change in perception of who Alex Rodriguez was. I think a lot of fans and people probably felt like, we thought this guy was playing the game clean, and he wasn't. They might have felt a little, I don't want to say betrayed, but kind of duped, if you will. But hopefully, as time goes on, maybe he'll be accepted into the Hall of Fame, maybe not. He's somebody that, in terms of the steroid era, I don't really look at like I do with Roger Clemens or a Barry Bonds, or a Rafael Palmeiro. I kind of look at him in a different light that, from what I've heard, he only did it a couple seasons, and then the other seasons, he was still really good. So I think it would not have made a difference in terms of if he was using or not. But again, who knows what will happen in the future. But those are just a couple of the big-time names and kind of the real surprises that I found in terms of who are these home run leaders from these different states. And a couple guys that I did not expect to be ahead of some other names that, you would probably inherently look at those names and say, I would guess that guy is ahead of the other guy just based off of his career accolades. But again, that is not the case, and we have just heard that in this segment. So that will close things out here for us in our second segment here on the GSMC Baseball Podcast. Thanks again for tuning in. Coming up after the break, I'll get into which team has now emerged as the most likely suitor for the very sought-after JT Realmuto, and which team I think he can make a good fit on now that the Mets are out of the conversation. It's been a lot of fun so far, folks, but we've got a lot more to go, so don't change that channel. We'll be right back here on the GSMC Baseball Podcast.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be, visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back to the GSMC Baseball Podcast. Great to have you all here still with me today. Jack Ridenauer again. And in the last segment, I shared who the home run leaders are from various states and what kind of careers they wound up having. I want to now discuss something that I have mentioned before, but has recently changed a little bit due to a certain team signing a certain player. So the New York Mets recently filled their catching issues by signing James McCann, former catcher for the Chicago White Sox, to a 4-year, $40 million deal. So that has now opened the door for many possibilities as to where JT Realmuto, who they were initially looking to sign potentially, might land next. And in all honesty, when I saw that McCann was going to the Mets, I wasn't necessarily thrilled about it. I wasn't necessarily shocked about it. I think that regardless, it is a huge upgrade from Wilson Ramos. I think Ramos is definitely at the tail end of his career, and McCann is coming off a year where he hit 289. And the year before that, in 2019, he was an all-star. So, in all honesty, I think it was a good move by the Mets, without question. Maybe they were trying to save a little bit of money at the catcher position because maybe they're trying to go after a big-name free agent like George Springer or Trevor Bauer or somebody else, and they didn't want to have to pay as much money as JT Realmuto wants, and they still were able to get a very solid catcher behind the plate. So, a couple teams that I think have now, in my opinion, emerged as some of the favorites as to where he could land next and where he might wind up, carrying out the rest of his career, or at least the next few years of his career. So the first team that has jumped to mind, and in all honesty, I've seen a lot of different publications and articles about this, the Nationals. And this would be a great fit for him, and here's why. Because Kurt Suzuki, who is, again, normally one of two catchers that really shares the responsibilities, him and Yan Gomes, Suzuki's going to be a free agent. He's a free agent right now, so he's probably not going to return. And Yan Gomes is becoming more of a backup as opposed to a starter. I mean, Gomes is really approaching into his 30s, well into his 30s, actually. And I think that as a result, you definitely don't want to have, a mid-30s catcher trying to hold on to the very last bit of time that he has in his career when you've got a team that is fairly young for the most part. I wouldn't say that it's the youngest team in baseball by any means, but I definitely think the Nationals do have a lot of young talent, obviously, with Trey Turner, Juan Soto. They definitely have pieces that they can build for the future with, and I think that's where JT Realmuto comes in really, really well. Now, both catchers for the Nationals did have very good years. Yan Gomes batted .284, Suzuki batted .270. Neither one of them were huge power number guys, so I think Realmuto will bring that, not to mention already a great bat, but he'll bring power with that swing also, and I think that's going to, again, separate the Nationals from a lot of other teams. Not to mention, I think adding Realmuto could take a lot of attention away from Soto and Turner. Pitchers are going to have to start focusing their attention on Realmuto also, not just on Juan Soto, not just on Trey Turner. So, again, I've made this point before. Usually when you add another, superstar onto a team that already has two superstars, it does allow other teams to have to take the attention away from those other previous two superstars that had already been on the team, because now there's this new guy that they also have to keep in mind. And so I think that is going to be a really great third bat for them in that lineup. You got Soto, obviously you have Turner, and then you have Realmuto there now. And I think that would be incredible, no question about it. And also it's a team that could pay him. They could pay, I think he wants around a $200 million contract. They could definitely pay him. I mean, yeah, they do have a lot of guys on a lot large contracts, Scherzer, Strasburg, but in the event that it came down to it, I'm sure that they could figure something out where he was able to come onto this team, especially with this team being, not that far removed from winning a World Series. So that's going to be another added reason why I think Realmuto would really enjoy coming to Washington and playing for the Nationals. And, it's a great franchise. I think Rizzo does a great job in the front office. He's handled it very nicely ever since he's been there. And I think that this is a team that has come a long way. And Realmuto, he might see that also. So that's the first team that I think he could land on. The second team, and personally, I have not seen anything in the news about this, but it just kind of came to mind the other day, and the Houston Astros. And first and foremost, you have to remember that they are losing two very significant players from their roster, most likely at least in free agency, Michael Brantley and George Springer, two of the really main centerpieces to their success the last 5-6 years. And now they're probably going to be walking in free agency. They're not going to be coming back to Houston. So that's two guys down on that roster that won a World Series in 2017. So now you're two guys down from that. You have to do something. You have to replace that in some fashion, because this Astros team was absolutely atrocious in terms of their performance as a team from the plate. I'm going to get into it a little bit, but they had a horrible, horrible turnaround from 2019 to 2020. I mean, it was literally two separate teams playing in two separate years. It was, looking at the difference and the drop in their numbers was actually kind of unsettling to look at. And just also knowing that there might have been a lot to do with that cheating scandal that they had because, I mean, it really proved they got caught, they came back the next year, and they did not do very well as a team across the board. But again, back to the original point, JT Realmuto, he'd be a phenomenal get because there's another reason why. Martin Maldonado, their normal catcher has, I would say about 80% of the responsibilities behind the plate, he's one of the worst hitting catchers in baseball. I mean, his 2020 stats were absolutely atrocious. Batted .215 from the plate, 6 homers, 24 RBIs, and a .727 OPS. So his OPS was okay, but then his average was awful. So I think that they would definitely benefit from bringing in Realmuto. No question they could pay him. They've got a large enough payroll that they could do that. And again, he would be a huge replacement for Martin Maldonado. And not to mention, his numbers are nearly identical to George Springer. I mean, if you look at their numbers from this past season, both of them had the same amount of RBIs. Realmuto batted .266, whereas Springer batted .265. But then Springer actually had 14 homers, whereas Realmuto, he had 11 homers. So I think it would be a great replacement of Maldonado, but it would also be a ginormous replacement of George Springer. Literally an identical bat in that lineup, and will bring much better catching abilities, would bring in much better defense. But again, I think he would overall boost the entire hitting issues and really just the entire hitting of the Astros that they really struggled this year. They were, in 2019, they had the best overall batting average for a team. They were number 1 in baseball for team batting average. In 2020, they were 20th in that same category. That is a huge drop-off. I mean, going from 1st to 20th, that is literally the biggest downfall that I think I can really remember in the last few years in terms of a team's performance from the plate. Not to mention, they also had the best OPS in 2019, and then they had the 16th best OPS in 2020. And so Realmuto having at least 3 straight 800 OPS seasons, I think that is going to really fix that problem. I mean, I think he could be a big problem solver for them. And in all honesty, he's a guy that could maybe finish out his career there, depending on how the rest of maybe 2021, 2022 goes, whatever it might be. If he does decide to stick around, I think he's going to be pleasantly surprised, because although this team has, again, probably had the darkest cloud following over them since 2019, 2018, I think that he could really bring them back out of that, really kind of dismal period, and could, again, shine a positive light back onto the Astros that they can win without having to cheat. So that's the second team that really kind of jumps out to mind. But then getting into these other 3 teams that, again, some of these teams are going to be obviously more likely than others. I'm not saying that any of these are going to be where he'll exactly go, but some of them, it might be. Who knows? The next team is the Phillies. And I think that, obviously him already being there, there's a familiarity factor into that. He's been in the division the last year or two. He also played for the Marlins, so he's very familiar with the NL East. So he could definitely want to stick around and play against teams that he's very, well attuned to playing against, and he's very aware of who is who and what is what in that division. But not to mention, the Phillies went out and got Dave Dombrowski, and now he's their president of baseball operations, and I think that is going to be a big, big, big tipping point for JT Realmuto. And in all honesty, it made me wonder, the Phillies hiring Dombrowski, was that kind of a subtle move to try and get Realmuto to stay? Because Dombrowski brings winning experience. He built together winning and really, World Series contending teams in just about every single place that he's been. He won a World Series in '97 with the Marlins. He won one in 2018 with the Red Sox. He built a World Series team in Detroit. So the guy can clearly win, and he's very good at obviously putting together winning baseball teams and putting them on the field. So I think that Dombrowski, he could really be kind of an angle that the Phillies try to use to work on Realmuto, to try and get him to stick around and trying to stay in Philadelphia. Not to mention the Phillies are already losing Didi Gregorius in this free agency this offseason, and I think that's going to be, again, one less bat in their lineup. And if you look at their lineup, you've got Bryce Harper, obviously. Now you've got the emergence of Alec Baum. You obviously have Rhys Hoskins, who did struggle in 2020, but he had a great 2019. You bring in JT Realmuto. There's a reason why this team was tied for 8th in the league in average and had the 11th most home runs in baseball. There is a reason for that, because they have great power hitting in their lineup, and Realmuto was a big part of that reason why they were so good this year as a hitting team. And I think that he could be, again, kind of the tipping point, that difference maker. If he can stick around and if he's a happy camper and he's got the money that he wants and the contract he wants, we might start to see an even higher level of play from JT Realmuto. I mean, who knows? But I think that, again, bringing on Dombrowski, losing Gregorius, I think the Phillies are aware that they can make a serious move and a serious, try and really pitch this to Realmuto and say, hey, you stick around. We've got this Dombrowski guy. He's clearly put together winning teams. You're going to be just fine. Stick around and stay for the show. So maybe he will, maybe he won't, but I think that in all honesty, his chances of staying in Philadelphia have increasingly gotten better within the last 2 weeks. I mean, increasingly gotten better. Because, again, that hiring and then McCann getting signed by the Mets, that's pretty much completely flipped the script in that one. So who knows what's going to happen, but I'm very curious about these last two teams because these were kind of just random thought ideas that I had that were, again, the first three were probably, in my opinion, pretty likely. Obviously, you throw in the Yankees. Obviously, you throw in the Cardinals. But, again, if you're the Cardinals, what do you do with Yadier Molina? If you're the Yankees, what are you going to do with Gary Sanchez? I'm pretty sure one of them is a free agent or one of them isn't. I'm not quite sure. But I think that you have to look at teams that have absolute holes at the catching position and also need a heavy bat in the lineup because that is what Realmuto brings. So the next team I want to discuss is the Colorado Rockies. And this is, again, a very random idea, but I think it could work because of a couple reasons. One of them is this. Out of their three catchers that played more than 25 games this year, so Elias Diaz, Tony Walters, and Drew Butera, none of them batted above 240. So they were well below the average that Realmuto had. And I think that is one reason right there. You bring in Realmuto, I mean, he is going to do everything and more than what those other three catchers were able to do this past year. So I think that is one reason why you would want to bring him on. But not to mention, you would be adding on a bat into a very heavy lineup, very similar to Philadelphia, where they've got a lot of power and a lot of promise, similar in Colorado. You've got Charlie Blackmon, who put together an incredible season, batted .303 this past year, 42 RBIs, was on pace to hitting above 400 this year also, so that's another thing to factor in. Then you've got Nolan Arenado, who, although he did struggle this year, I mean, only batted .253, he had 8 homers and 26 RBIs. He's been a 7-8-time All-Star, so somebody that has been one of the best third basemen in baseball. And then Trevor Story also. Trevor Story's numbers were just pretty much, again, very identical, maybe a little bit higher, a little bit lower in certain categories than JT Realmuto's. But he also, again, had 11 home runs, 28 RBIs, 289 average, and 874 OPS. So you have now, in Colorado, Story, Arenado, and Blackmon. You add Realmuto to the mix, and he fixes the issues at the catcher position. And I think you're going to be smooth sailing from that point moving forward if you're the Rockies. Not to mention, it's a hitter's ballpark. It is the best ballpark to go to if you're a power hitter because the air is pretty much non-existent there, and every single baseball that gets crushed just absolutely flies. And so I think that would be a very ideal thing for him also, being able to be in a hitter's ballpark. And I think you could even see an increase in his numbers. Although his numbers have not really taken any sort of a step back, I would say, I still think that you would see some huge jump in his performance and really in his production. Not to mention, this is another thing about this. He would bring way more defense than what Walters brings, because Walters is their main catcher, I would say, and Realmuto would, without question, bring so much more defense. And here's why. In 2019, Walters threw out 23 runners. Realmuto threw out 43 runners. 20 more runners were thrown out by Realmuto than Walters. So right there, again, 47% throwing out percentage, caught stealing percentage, right? He led the entire MLB in that category. So you're going to know, every team is going to, without question, have a really good defensive catcher when you get JT Realmuto. That's almost a given. The other added part of it, though, is that he's got a great bat, and so that's another reason why he's such an ideal candidate. So I think that in terms of, kind of the dynamic of this Rockies team, and also just it's a hitter's ballpark, and they really need help at the catcher position, I think that he would be a great fit in Colorado. I really, really do. The last team I want to touch on, though, that I think would be a big-time stretch, I honestly don't think this would happen at all, but it just kind of was an idea to throw out the wall and see what would happen. It would be the Chicago Cubs. And, again, a huge long shot because you've got Wilson Contreras there, and he's been very good. There is absolutely nothing wrong with Contreras. He's actually been phenomenal, in all honesty. But I think what you could do with that is you could do a couple things, and I'll get into that in a little bit, but what really jumps out to me, again, is the defensive aspect of this. I mean, Realmuto is way better defensively than Contreras is. Again, going to the caught-stealing numbers in 2019, Contreras only threw out 16 guys. Realmuto, again, threw out 43, so the defense, night and day, in all honesty, night and day. Now, here's where I get into what the Cubs could do with Wilson Contreras. They could do a couple things. One, they could obviously trade him. I'm sure there's a lot of teams out there that would be very happy acquiring Wilson Contreras, a multiple-time All-Star, somebody that brings a very good bat for the most part, and he's a solid player all around. I mean, he's a very, very good player. So you could definitely use him as trade bait, and you could probably get something pretty good in return, I would at least think. So that's option number one. Option number two is this. Something very similar to what the Mets could do if they went after LeMahieu, moving Cano over to DH once he comes back from his suspension. The same thing could happen if the universal DH does go into effect this year, which, again, as of right now, that's not going to happen. But if that were to happen, then you could say Contreras could move over to DH because he spent almost half the year, actually, I believe it was about a quarter of the year, about 15, 20 games or so at the DH. So you could move him over to DH and stick Realmuto in as the new catcher now. And in all honesty, Contreras, he'd only have to focus on hitting, and it would take one less thing out of his pocket that he'd have to worry about with the fielding aspect of catching. And Realmuto could then step in and say, I'll assume the responsibilities as the everyday catcher, and you also already get that great bat in the lineup. So I think that is definitely, an idea or a couple ideas that they could do. The Cubs have shown a willingness to trade guys. I mean, Chris Bryant's name has continued to circulate around in trades, going even back to the trade deadline this year. So it's not necessarily, I think, a far-fetched idea. It is something that could definitely happen. It could, without question, occur with them maybe trading Contreras or maybe trading Chris Bryant or whatever to trying to free up some space on their team and their salary cap to try and go and get JT Realmuto. Do I think it'll happen? Probably not. But I think that, I think, again, the main thing of it is better catcher defensively, would get a great bat, and it would definitely, bring some life to this really depressing lineup that they had this past year, which was 27th in the league in team batting average, and then 17th in team home runs. So this would definitely be, I think, a huge get for the Chicago Cubs. But in all honesty, out of these 5-6 teams that I mentioned, I think the team that is most likely going to land him, it's going to be an NL East team, in my opinion. I think it's going to be either the Phillies or the Nationals. He has a familiarity in that division. He definitely wants, I think, to stick around in that division. And again, that's probably, very ideal for him. I think the next most realistic place that he could land, maybe the Astros, but in all honesty, I could see the Rockies coming out of nowhere. The other question, though, of it is this. Will Colorado pay him what he wants? And that's the other thing. Colorado is not necessarily a huge payroll team, right? They're not a team that's going to go out and spend hundreds of millions of dollars on guys. It's just not going to happen. I think Arenado was kind of an exception in that rule, but for the most part, they're not going to go out and spend a huge amount of money. And then the Chicago Cubs, I just don't see them getting rid of Contreras. Even though they do seem willing to trade guys, I don't think it'll happen. So Nationals, Phillies, I could see one of those two teams, in all honesty. Again, being in that NL East, he's always played in the NL East, so that might really kind of steer him into the direction of wanting to stay in Philadelphia or just driving, about 2.5 hours south to the nation's capital and playing for the Nationals. So that'll do it for this segment, folks. Thanks again for sticking around. Stay right there, though. We'll be right back after this commercial break for the final segment today, where I will get into which young players I would want to build around and try to build a winning team for the future. Don't go anywhere, everyone, because we have one last segment here on the GSMC Baseball Podcast.
Want to know the latest in soccer? Then listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast. From MLS, the World Cup, and the Premier League, we've got you covered. The latest updates, the hottest matches, and news on the league's top players. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast.
David Beckham scores the goal to take England all the way to the World Cup final.
Listen now.
Hey everyone, and welcome back for the final segment here on the GSMC Baseball Podcast. Jack Ridenauer still with you, and in the previous segment, I jumped into discussing which teams have now become the likely suitors to land JT Realmuto, with the Mets going after James McCann and filling their catching needs. I want to finish the show discussing which young players I would most likely want to build a team around for the future. So I've gotten a couple of names that I, came up with, some of the younger big-time superstars in baseball, at least the up-and-coming superstars in baseball, and I want to discuss, why I think they should be there and be a player that, you would really want to build a team around and try and build a culture around, and what they might wind up doing in their career in the long run and how they've kind of been so far. So the first player that I am very sold on, and that, in all honesty, I think this team is kind of starting to build for the future around him, and that's Juan Soto. I mean, I think he is well beyond the age that he portrays. I mean, he's 22 years old, but he plays like he's been in the league for at least 10 years. I mean, going back to the World Series in 2019, and I always use this as an example, because he was absolutely... he was unshakable. You just could not get to the guy. And he was 20 years old. He was 20 years old. I think he turned 21 during the World Series. And, I mean, he literally stood in the box and acted as if he had been there and done that so many times. And I think that's such a rare thing to have in a player, especially somebody that is under the age of 25. I mean, being 22 years old and being able to go up into the batter's box, going up fearless, absolutely having no worries in the world, and you're staring back at one of the best pitchers in baseball in either Justin Verlander or Garrett Cole or whomever it was that he was going up against last year. I mean, I think that should tell you a lot about who Juan Soto is and what he's capable of doing. I mean, 20 years old in 2019, and he batted 34 homers, 110 RBIs, and a 282 average. And then this year, he follows up with an NL high 351 average, and then he has an MLB high OBP in 490, and a slugging percentage that's almost 700 at 695. And then his OPS was well over 1,100 at a 1.185. So right there, that's telling you that, okay, this guy is on an upward trend in his career, and there is absolutely no slowing him down. Now, I will say, what I do kind of worry about him is the strikeouts. He did have 132 strikeouts last year, but he is pretty solid when it comes to being patient at the plate. Every single year, he's had over a 400 OBP, and his slugging percentage, actually, every single year he's been in the league since 2018, has been above 500. So he's a patient hitter for the most part, and he has a lot of power in his bat. Then this year, this is what I think, again, something that is going to follow Soto for the rest of his career, is I think his willingness to improve and get better. I mean, you look at his walk-to-strikeout ratio in 2019, and it was 108 to 132. And then in 2020, it was 41 to 28. He had 41 walks this year to only 28 strikeouts and 196 plate appearances. So if you're telling me that this guy is not a player that you would want to try and build for the future and try and really put some added pieces around and maybe have as the nucleus to a potential World Series winning team, which he's already gone through and he's already been a part of, I think you'd be a little off your rocker, but that's just me. That is just me. But all in all, I think Juan Soto would be a great player to have, a really, really, I think, needed bat in a lot of people's lineups, and not to mention somebody that I would want to try and build a team for the future around without question. So the next guy I want to discuss is Fernando Tatis. Obviously, I think those first two guys that you hear, Soto and Tatis, they're going to be the future of baseball, I think. I think we'll see them as kind of the main pieces of the sport of baseball for the next couple years. We're starting to see kind of these older players that we all grew up, or at least people in my age range, 22 to 25, all these players that we grew up watching, they're starting to phase out, slowly retire. You know, you obviously have guys like Albert Pujols and Miguel Cabrera immediately come to mind, and they're at the very tail end of their career. And I think now we're starting to see an emergence of new talent in the league with Tatis and Soto and a couple other guys that I'm going to get to in a little bit. But with Tatis is, again, very young, under 25. He's 21 years old, and this year he played incredible. And not to mention, last year was his rookie year. Now, I will say, I'm going to have to point this out, and I don't want it to sound like it's a negative thing, but he's only played in the most games he's ever played in an entire career is 84, or an entire season is 84. And he's only played 2 years. You have to remember that. In 2019, He played in 84 games, but then this past year, he played in almost every single game. He played in 59 total games. So maybe next year he'll come back ready to go, a full 162-game season, and I think that's where we'll really see the real and the true Fernando Tatis, what he can do for an entire season. Because in 2019, he exploded onto the scene. 22 homers, 53 RBIs, and a .317 batting average, all in 84 games. That's not too bad. Not to mention he had 16 stolen bases. I will say, this is, again, another thing to look at and another thing to potentially be a little concerned about for him is his strikeout numbers. And they're not as somewhat proportional as Soto's were. In 2019, he had 30 walks to 110 strikeouts. So the patience is just not there quite yet for Fernando Tatis. But I will say what is there is the power. I mean, he has had 2 straight years where he's been over 900 in OPS, and he's had 2 straight years where he's been over 150 OPS plus. So the guy can clearly hit. There is no question about it. He's one of the best at producing runs for his team in baseball, and he's somebody that also, he's got a pretty solid glove. I mean, I think out of all the shortstops in baseball, he's probably going to wind up becoming one of the better power hitters at the position in the long run. And I think, again, the Padres are starting to build a younger core, a younger nucleus, a younger group of guys in San Diego, and I think that Tatis is going to be the focal point of that, and we're starting to see that right now, in all honesty. I mean, I think if you look at their trajectory from 2019 to 2020, it was clear that a lot of the players that they went out and got and a lot of the players that they had come up through their farm system have started to pay out for them and really started to work in their favor. So I'm very excited what happens in San Diego, and I think that Tatis is going to be the center of it. Next guy I want to talk about, son of a Hall of Fame baseball player, probably just gave it away, but maybe not, Vladimir Guerrero Jr. And he's an interesting case, and this is why. Guerrero has, again, he's only played in 2 years. Now, he did get a very large sample size in 2019. He played in 123 games, and he actually batted fairly solid. He batted .272 from the plate. He had 15 homers and 69 RBIs. Not to mention, he had 106 OPS plus. So for a 20-year-old, that's not too bad of numbers. Obviously, I don't think he's putting up the Juan Soto type numbers, and I think that is what kind of aggravates me about the way people perceive Guerrero Jr. over Soto. I think that the name definitely gets him a little bit more of notoriety, or at least a little bit more of a benefit of the doubt than, say, Soto, because I think Juan Soto is a way better baseball player than Vladimir Guerrero Jr. That's just me, but if you look at their career numbers, I would say that Juan Soto is definitely better. But coming up on this year, I think that is going to be a lot of kind of, testing of that. Is that true or is that not true? We're going to have to see how Guerrero comes out this year. He had an okay year this year. I mean, 9 homers, 33 RBIs, .262 average. Nothing spectacular. His OPS numbers definitely went up from 772 to 791. So you can see that there is an upward trend in his power numbers. But the real question is going to be this. Can he limit the strikeouts? This is another thing that Tatis also struggles with, but it's clear Guerrero does too. I mean, he had 91 Ks last year to 46 walks. And then in 2020, he had 38 strikeouts to 20 walks. So he got a little bit better, but it wasn't anything, I would say, as a drastic improvement, right? And I think that obviously, playing 60 games, there's going to be a very limited amount of time to really make up for any poor performances from games before. So I think that is another thing to factor in, only a very small sample size. But for the most part, he's going to have to figure out the patience from the plate. And the other thing is he's going to have to figure out the glove. A lot of people have been saying that he's really trying to get back into his third baseman form, but a lot of people are saying that he might just get stuck over at first base or just be a DH. And I think that being a DH for him is going to give him arguably probably a better shot at being a great baseball player than if he had to play in the field. I'm not saying that he's a bad fielder, but I definitely think that he is better used as just a strict hitter as opposed to, a good fielder. In all honesty, I think that for the most part, I would say that, I don't know. There's something about Vladimir Guerrero Jr. that I'm not completely sold on yet. I think that he is definitely a player to look at and really look forward to in the future, and I think it's going to take him a couple years. But I think that there is a lot of hype around him, and the production has not necessarily been where I would think it would be in terms of the amount of notoriety and the amount of hype that's been around his name. But again, I think that he's going to be just fine in the long run. The next guy I want to discuss is Cody Bellinger. And Cody Bellinger, that should not be a shock for a lot of people. The guy's won an MVP. He's been an All-Star 2 times. He's won a World Series. He's won a Rookie of the Year. He's on this list probably the most decorated player I would say, out of all these young guys that I'm going to mention. And the guy, he's been pretty up and down his career, though. I will say this. He's been up and down, up and down. Well, actually kind of down, then up, then down, and then up again. So in 2017, his rookie year, he had a really great year from the plate, 39 homers and 97 RBIs. He had a 933 OPS and a 267 average. Comes back in 2018, 25 homers, 76 RBIs. His average dips down to 260, but his OPS drops over 100 points to 814. And then in 2019, it goes right back up to over 1,000, and it goes from 814 in 2018 to 1.035 in 2019. So again, that kind of up and down progression is something that definitely worries me about Cody Bellinger. He has won an MVP. I'm not taking that away from him. He has been to an All-Star game a couple times. So he is capable of being a very, very good baseball player. Not to mention he's a fantastic fielder. I mean, his defense in this playoffs, honestly, I think saved the Dodgers in more ways than one. And that's another thing to kind of factor into him is that he not only brings a lot of offense, but he brings defense with him too. And I think that's another reason why you'd want to build your team around him. The one problem I would have is this. How consistent will he be? His consistency is definitely something to look at because he's been up and down all over his career. And if he's not able to settle it down and really try and, churn out a couple solid, productive years and be consistent with it, I think then that kind of deters from his case of being a really solid player to build around. Even though he clearly has shown that he's capable of it, it's just the consistency factor. Can he do it year in and year out at the highest level possible? And if not, then I think that's going to really be the telltale sign of whether or not he can actually be a player that is a franchise player. But I think that he is. I think the Dodgers have a really great player for quite some time, and they're definitely already showing that as of right now. So the next guy I want to discuss, Ronald Acuna Jr., another guy, very young, 22 years old. He's been a Rookie of the Year, an All-Star, Silver Slugger multiple times. He's got another this is another guy that's got a great bat. And the last 2 years, before 2020, they were pretty solid seasons for him. In 2018, 26 homers and 64 RBIs in 111 games as a 20-year-old and batting .293. And then the next year he comes back, belts over 40 homers and over 100 RBIs and a .280 average, not to mention an .883 OPS. That's pretty solid, I would have to say. And he also led the NL in stolen bases with 37. So that's another part of Acuna Jr.'s game that has to be taken into consideration. He has no problem when he gets on base, he's thinking the next base that he can get to. And that is what baseball is right now. It is getting guys in that scoring position and trying to move them over as quickly as possible and as efficiently. And it's clear that Acuna Jr. is capable of doing that. I mean, 2019, he had 37 stolen bases, and he was only caught stealing 9 times. So that's a pretty solid, I would say, percentage of how often he's getting thrown out in comparison to how many times that he's stealing bases. That's a very good percentage. I would bet my bottom dollar that Acuna Jr., 9 times out of 10, if he's on base, he's probably going to advance and get there safely. Now, in 2020, he did take a little bit of a step back, but what's ironic is that this was his best OPS year. Batted .987 in OPS, and then he had 14 homers and 29 RBIs. But his best season in terms of his All-Star season, had the NL high in plate appearances in 2019, had an NL high in runs with 127 and the 37 stolen bases, the 41 homers and 101 RBIs. His OPS was .883. It's the lowest it's been in his career. So that's very ironic. I don't know. It's just something to, kind of point out that although he might put up huge power numbers, doesn't necessarily mean that he's going to turn out to be, or at least percentage-wise have those huge OPS years. But I think that Acuna Jr. is another guy to watch for, and I think that a lot of teams like the Braves, I think they've set themselves up for the future very, very well. Them, the Nationals, the Padres, these teams, it's not just Acuna Jr. I mean, you obviously have Ozzie Albies there, and same thing with Soto. You don't just have Soto, you also have Trey Turner. So I think that these guys are going to be the centerpieces, but they're adding those other outside pieces to help boosten up kind of the overall play of the team. So Acuna Jr. is definitely a player to kind of look at for the future. But then the last 3 guys I got to discuss, I mean, they have absolutely exploded onto the scene the last couple years. Pete Alonso being one of them. I mean, Pete Alonso has been absolutely incredible, especially his rookie year. I mean, it was an All-Star, and he was a Rookie of the Year in 2019. He led all of baseball with 53 home runs. He set the rookie record for the most home runs in a rookie season. He had 120 RBIs. He had a 260 average and a 941 OPS and a 147 OPS plus. Those are, without question, in other kind of years, I would say, if he wasn't a rookie, and if his average was a hair higher, I would definitely say that that's MVP caliber numbers. But again, going back to kind of the same thing with Tatis and Soto, the strikeouts and the walks are kind of a problem. You know, you got 72 walks to 183 strikeouts in 2019. That's a really bad ratio. You know, that's almost, you know, a 2-to-1 strikeout to walk ratio, just about, actually a little bit over that. So I think that is something else that he has to work on, and it's going to be, I think, a thing across the board for all of these guys, right? They come in the league, they're a little bit on edge, a little antsy, they want to perform well, they want to impress the first time out, and I think that definitely kind of, it becomes kind of a mental thing with them, and it's, I want to be that good just right now, I want it now, I want to get to it as quick as possible, and it takes time to build that up, and it takes time to improve. So the patience is going to come, right? I mean, the OBP is not great. You know, he had a 358 OBP in 2019 and a 326 OBP in 2020. So he clearly does need to work on patience at the plate, trying to get on base, and grinding out at-bats. And when you've got a guy that has a huge home run total and a huge RBI total, you're going to clearly get a guy that's going to have a high swing and miss ratio, right? You're going to have a guy that's going to go up really trying to swing for the fences. That's what normally happens when you have a home run guy. So in terms of that, though, that can be figured out, that can be settled down, but what you can't take away from him is that he is clearly an offensive threat, and that he is clearly going to be somebody that adds a lot of depth into any team's lineup. And, you know, if he can stick around with the Mets for a long time, I think they're going to be just fine, because they definitely have a player for the future. So the last two guys I want to discuss, Shane Bieber, one of them, a reigning AL Cy Young winner from 2020, won the Triple Crown in pitching, also was an all-star. He won the ERA title. He led the league in just about every single pitching category that you could possibly think of. 2019 was a very good year, though, for him, I will say. He was 15-8. He had a 3.28 ERA. He also led the entire league in shutouts and also complete games in 2019. And then he also had a 259 strikeout season in 214 and a third innings. So right there, you're telling me that that guy is not a player that you would want to build for around the future. I would say that you're a little crazy, because almost 260 strikeouts as a 24-year-old is pretty sensational. And then he follows up 2020 with an 8-1 record, which, again, the 8 wins was tied for the most in baseball. He had a 1.63 ERA, which was, again, the highest in baseball, and then 122 strikeouts, which was also the highest in baseball, so that's why he won the Triple Crown. So another guy to definitely watch for, and somebody that I think would be a great piece to have for an entire, you know, team, and really an entire organization. And I think that the Indians, they definitely have their, you know, they're pretty set in terms of the pitching. It's just a matter of, can they get that hitting? Can they get some hitting to try and improve that overall kind of feel on this team right now, because the hitting is definitely lacking. The pitching's there, but the hitting is lacking. So Shane Bieber's definitely one guy that I would definitely want to build around for an entire future and really kind of an entire team. And the last guy is Eloy Jimenez. I mean, Jimenez has, again, exploded on into the scene as one of the best power hitters in baseball, and one of the best young power hitters, too. I mean, he's 23 years old, coming off a 296 year in 2020 with 14 homers and 41 RBIs and an 891 OPS. So that's another guy that has a lot of pop in his bat. He's able to definitely contribute. I mean, he was a Silver Slugger this past year, and he was 5th in the AL in total bases. So that's another thing. The guy can just hit. He can flat out hit. He was 7th in the AL in home runs. He was 9th in hits in the AL. I mean, he was a top 10 hitter in the AL without question. And he's also a pretty solid fielder. I mean, he's turned the most double plays as a left fielder in 2019. And, you know, although it wasn't a crazy number, it was only 1, it was still, you know, he's still capable of being, you know, a very good fielder. I mean, he had 190 putouts at left field, which was 3rd in 2019. And he had the most defensive games in left field this year with 54. So the guy is definitely a very, very good fielder. But what he's going to bring to the table is that hitting. And I think that's going to be a big separating factor in the long run for this White Sox team. And not to mention, they've already done a great job of surrounding him with other very, very talented players that I think is going to really help out his development and the entire team's development in the long run. So just a couple guys I wanted to mention that I think could really impact any team that they're on for the future, and that they are pieces that teams would want to definitely use and try and build for years to come on any baseball team. So just a couple guys, but I think the future of baseball is in really good hands because there's a lot of talent out there already, and they're all going to be around the league for quite some time. So that'll wrap it up here for us today. Thank you again for listening to the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I would like to ask that you please remember to subscribe to the show and write a nice review that really helps us. Also, if you can please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, we would also really appreciate that. Once again, everyone, thanks so much for joining, and until next time, have a great day.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.